they may, but people who are bald, who have got ginger hair, who are short, who are fat, they all tell me that in jobs they've often felt discriminated against because they felt that their physical attributes were counted against them. And so my question to Trevor Phillips was whether or not if people could demonstrate that they'd been discriminated against because of their appearance, whether or not that was something that the Equality and Human Rights Commission ought to consider should be included in their discrimination legislation.
Well, let me tell you something, Philip. When a black person is punched and kicked to the ground and the last words that they hear are the N-word or the P-word as the boots and the spits and the hatred piles in, if you could empathize with that for one moment, if you could imagine being Stephen Lawrence for 1 minute, you would know the vast difference between jokes about people with red hair or baldness or fatness and being black in a society where racism is out and wearing hobnailed boots. And the fact that you can't empathize with it, that you bombard Trevor Phillips, you might argue wasting public money and time with 19 letters on this kind of nonsense.
19 letters in 18 months, that's about one a month by my reckoning.
Well, but I've never written 19, I've been in Parliament 23 years and I've never written 19 letters to anybody. I'm astounded that you felt that was a proper use of your time and the public's money.
Well, how long does it take you to write 19 letters, George, in 18 months?
I couldn't sustain the concentration on such trivia over 19 letters. It's totally trivial. I mean, the reason I asked you to come on tonight is because the last time I spoke to you, you seemed like a sensible person. And then I discover you're writing 19 letters to the Equalities Commission asking whether baldness, for example, should be included in discrimination legislation.
George, if you, I don't know how much time you spend talking to your constituents, but if you spend a good time talking to them, you would find out that one of the things that they will hate above all else in the country is the excessive amount of political correctness that we face in this country. The fact that people feel that they're not free to speak out on issues that they care about. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we've seen the growth of the BNP over the last few years, because they felt so frustrated that they can't have their say, that they feel they're being silenced by zealots telling them what they can say and what they can't say.
Well,
so do you not think that the rise of the BNP, the fact that people are so fed up with political correctness, is worth raising with the Equality and Human Rights?
I'm glad that you've raised that. I'm glad that you've raised that.
Philip, this politically correct culture on it.
Phil, I'm glad you've raised that, because I was slightly anxious about doing so. You know, if somebody told me that Nick Griffin had written to Trevor Phillips asking him what was wrong with blacking up, I wouldn't have been surprised. The fact that a Conservative Member of Parliament writes to Trevor Phillips and asks what's offensive about white people blacking up is actually the point. Now, if you think the way to deal with the BNP is to act and sound like the BNP, then that's a very odd strategy for tackling them.
Well, I mean, it's just ridiculous to say that I either act or sound like the BNP. That's just ludicrous. But the point of why do you think the BNP in 1997 had no councillors anywhere in the country and now have over 50 and 2 MEPs? Do you think it's because the country's become more racist over the last 12 years?
I think there's lots of reasons, and one of them is
people have become more racist, is it?
Yes, that's one of the reasons. Yes, because people like you and others stir up these kind of dark forces with the kind of things that you're saying and writing. But that's not the main reason. The main reason is that the so-called Labour government has utterly and completely betrayed and let down the vast majority of working people and poor people in this country, white and black. And white people are easily prey if they have experienced the bitter letdown that Labour has been, to people, siren voices, luring them onto the rocks of racism. And I'm very concerned, because I try to empathise with the people on the receiving end of that lash of bigotry and discrimination and hatred. Sure. You apparently don't find that easy.
No, quite the reverse, George. In fact, what I would urge you and your listeners to do is to go on to the website of the Campaign Against Political Correctness. It's www.capc.co.uk. You can go on there and you will see a section marked "Not in My Name." And you will actually see lots of people from ethnic minorities, people who are gay, different minority groups who political correctness is being done supposedly in their name, and they actually point out on our website how actually all of these things are counterproductive. They don't help, they hinder, that they build up resentments that otherwise wouldn't exist. This is this political correctness, this view that you shouldn't say these things or do anything. This is the thing that's fueling people's resentment. And political correctness, it may well be well-meaning, but it's having a devastating effect. And the people who suffer, the ones who suffer at the end of the day, are the ethnic minorities and the other minority groups, because there is a resentment towards them that otherwise would never, ever exist. And I'm afraid people with your attitude, George, you don't mean any offence, but I'm afraid your kind of strategy is actually causing more problems than it's solving.
Well, I'll tell you this, Phil. You're game and you stand your ground, and I salute you for that. Thanks very much for coming on the show.
Pleasure anytime, George.
All the best. That was the Conservative MP, Philip Davies, the man who's written 19 letters to Trevor Phillips, asking such questions as what's wrong with white people blacking up, and whether bald people oughtn't to be included in anti-discrimination legislation. He stood his ground. He's made his point. We gave him 14 and a half minutes to do so, and we want to hear your point of view. 08717 22 33 44.